Welcome back to our 32 for 32 NFL preview series. We are heading to Ric Flair country. Woo!
Woo!
And we are
my was not good.
We were talking Carolina Panthers and a new era starting in Carolina. Lots of changes, coaches, quarterbacks. We're going to get into it. What's your take on the Panthers and a new look, new logo kind of thing up top? What do you think about that? Don't you think they should go to the baby blue as their main jersey opposed to the black?
Yeah, I think it's time for a reboot of the entire logo.
Why? Because it's 1997, 6, 5?
5. Definitely 5.
Yeah.
It's got to be 5. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's time. It's time.
I agree with you. I saw someone do a mock-up. I think I saw it on UniWatch of the helmet in baby blue with black face mask, black logo.
Okay.
Looked cool. Looked better. But
it probably even looked better with a black helmet.
It might. It very well might.
I like the black pants.
I do like the black pants. I like the black pants as well. Yeah. Let's get to it. We discussed it here. We got changes. We got changes for the Carolina Panthers, 5-11, fourth in the South, and new coaching staff. Baylor, Temple's own Matt Rhule, come on down.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to say that the Carolina Panthers went all in on Matt Rhule would be a gigantic understatement. I mean, what was it, like close to $70 million to acquire the services of Matt Rhule? Look, I think he's he's definitely an interesting coach. I like him a lot. I think that he's done a nice job. Basically, it all stops. And he's a program changer. And that's frankly what Carolina kind of needs right now. They're rebooting. They hit the Control-Alt-Delete and decided to restart.
Blowing in the cartridge.
Yeah, the whole nine. And and he has an interesting staff, particularly the coordinators. I mean, let's start with the defense. He brought in his own, the guy he had with him from Temple through at Baylor. And Baylor's defense, they were stingy. Pretty good. So I think it should be interesting. And then Joe Brady, I think, really was the prized acquisition. Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator that Ed Orgeron brought in LSU, and a lot of people credit him for creating and establishing the offense that allowed Joe Burrow to flourish the way he did. So I think it's an interesting staff, and I think Matt Rhule, Northeast guy, really just he's a blue collar guy, but is also a players coach, and so it should be really interesting. I'm rooting for him. I've liked him. He was an assistant with the New York Giants back in the day, and did a wonderful job at Temple and Baylor. So
yeah, I certainly loved what he did at Temple.
Yeah,
it was Temple, a program that us as Rutgers guys is a rival of some sorts, especially on the recruiting trail, just from the area. But it was good to see a program that was in shambles start to get better, and then a guy come in and make some changes to it. I don't like his alma mater, but it is what it is.
Well, what's interesting about him is, so Temple, you can make the argument with Al Golden that Matt Rhule did not bring it literally from the ashes, right?
No, but he continued.
With Baylor.
Oh, Baylor.
And everything that went on with Art Briles, from 1-11 to almost making the college football playoffs and he got the most out of that roster.
Being on the doorstep of a near death penalty kind of scenario. And I don't blame him for getting out of there. I mean, he was always long for the pros anyway. So it's interesting. It's an interesting place for him. We're going to get to it when we get to our key questions, but let's move into acquisitions, because this is, and then we're going to get to the departures, but let's take a look at who he is bringing in. Some notable names here.
Yeah, so obviously the Cam Newton era is over. He brought in Teddy Bridgewater, who I mean, some people are not as high on him. I'm a believer that he could be a solid starter in this league. I think he's more of a system guy. He's gonna play with it himself. He makes the smart decisions. But look, when it comes down to it, if he needs to make a throw, he can do it. And Mike and I have seen it in person when he did it on one leg against a very good Rutgers secondary when he was in Louisville to win the Big East. And that was a very talented Rutgers defensive backfield with pros that are still in this league. Logan Ryan, who should be acquired by someone at some point, and Deron Harmon, Marcus Cooper. That was a very talented defensive backfield that he did that against. And then I thought Robbie Anderson, he's Matt Rhule's reuniting with him, former Temple guy, is definitely, I don't know if he's a true number one receiver, but the one thing he stretches the field. He helps open up a field, which is really good, and open up an offense. Pharaoh Cooper, he could be a Deebo Samuel if I almost feel as if he's underwhelmed in his career so far, but I definitely think he could be a Deebo Samuel-like guy. Russell Okung, the Panthers traded Trey Turner, their guard, for Russell Okung. When healthy, Russell Okung is a top-tier starter. The problem is, can he be healthy? And Tahir Whitehead is a decent linebacker. I think he's sometimes a little bit more limited in that he's a first and second down linebacker. But if they're able to use him in creative ways, he could definitely be effective for that defense.
I've always liked Teddy Bridgewater ever since that game where he sliced and diced Rutgers. I mean, I didn't like it at the time, obviously.
Yeah, I was impressed by that effort. You had to be.
It was an immense amount of respect after the fact, and the guy is a gamer. And also, maybe, rumor and innuendo, there's this group on Facebook, NCAA 14 Facebook group. Teddy Bridgewater comments in there. Now,
interesting.
He says it's himself, and the moderator says it's him too. But I don't know. But if that is the case, and he's a cool dude because he's still playing NCAA 14 and he's interacting with people.
Yeah.
Let's get to it. Opt-outs on all over the place, including the COVID scenario.
Yeah. Well, I think that Carolina was not quite as hurt, so to speak, as others in terms of the COVID opt-out. Obviously, because they're both linebackers, Jordan Mack and Christian Miller, it's going to affect the depth of that position group, but neither were expected to be starters per se. So I think that in general, it's not going to be too bad or too big an issue. With respect to the departures, as we said, it's a lot of, for the most part, a lot of older veterans, Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, Trey Turner,
but they're
traded away. Yeah, big names. Gerald McCoy, who was expected to have a large role with the Cowboys, but has since been injured. Mario Addison went to my second favorite team, the Buffalo Bills. James Bradbury went to my first favorite team, the New York Giants. He'll probably be the only person there that could actually cover someone. Eric Reed, it's interesting that he's a departure. Obviously, people know he was probably the main supporter and co-participant with Colin Kaepernick back in the day with respect to the kneeling during the national anthem. But I think that people often, same thing with Colin Kaepernick, which we've talked about in other episodes of the Goal Line Stand. I think a lot of people, because of that, overlooked that Eric Reed was a good player. But Panthers kind of wanted to go in a younger route, and like we mentioned, they're starting over, so it made sense. And for the most part, a lot of these players, I say James Bradbury is the biggest departure in terms of a younger player with a lot of upside.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to look at Cam Newton and they're going to look at Greg Olsen and they're going to say, "Wow!" But look, Greg Olsen couldn't stay healthy. And
every year he was breaking his foot.
Right. And Cam Newton was beat up, and we talked about it with New England. Maybe it's a change of pace, change of scenery that helps him. But he wasn't the guy. He wasn't Superman anymore. Yeah. He became just another dude.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the rebuild. Let's take a look at their draft. Interesting. Very, very, very defensive oriented for Matt Rhule.
It's about as defensive as you can get because there are no offensive players that they drafted. Granted, somebody could always make a transition, but look, I thought that they, particularly the first 3 picks, got really good value for each of them. Derek Brown was considered one of the best defensive players in the draft. When they got him where they did, I really I likened him to Ndamukong Suh, and set aside all the issues regarding the stomping and some of the other suspensions. And Ndamukong Suh is still a really good defensive tackle in this league. So to draft him early in the first, a guy comparable to him early in the first round, I'll take it. Yetur Gross-Matos is a guy Mike and I know very well, having watched him at Penn State. Very talented player. To get him in the second round, he's a guy a lot of people thought would go in the first. I think he's going to pair very well with Brian Burns.
I like that pick in the second round.
It's going to be a nice, what's it called? That's a nice pairing for defensive ends. Jeremy Chin from Southern Illinois. Go
Salukis.
Yes, go Salukis. The home of Brandon Jacobs. So now they have another. So he was actually drafted earlier than Brandon Jacobs. Brandon Jacobs won in the 4th round back in the 2005 draft. But Jeremy Chin, a lot of people view him as the next Cam Chancellor. And, that's it. To have anyone who is considered comparable to Cam Chancellor, sign me up. I would take that in a second. That's a tone setter for your defense. And again, as we're saying, they're going young. They want to get faster, stronger, bigger. And, Jeremy Chin sort of epitomizes that. He is a really large safety. I think he's around 6'3" or 6'4". Very athletic. He's actually faster than Cam Chancellor. We'll see if the physicality, obviously Southern Illinois being a Division I FCS program, he's not facing quite the same caliber of talent. So we'll see if that physicality can transfer over. But in terms of the measurables, he actually exceeds Cam Chancellor for the most part. I also really like Kenny Robinson and Bravion Roy, the 5th and 6th round players, selections that they had. Obviously, Roy is someone that Matt Rhule was very familiar with, being that he coached him. So I think, he's not going to just draft players simply because, they played for me. No, well, it's that's true. But in this league, it's really about, it's about winning. It's about a bottom line. And I thought Bravion Roy it kind of epitomizes the kind of guy that Matt Rhule likes. There's a certain toughness and physicality to a Matt Rhule player. And I thought that Roy sort of epitomized that at Baylor. So all in all, I mean, look, obviously the one clear complaint you could lobby against this draft was that there were no offensive players. But having said that, defense wins championships, and you need to have a good defense. And they got good players, and they got good depth and some interesting prospects. So I can't fault them that much, even though it is sort of a unique approach.
It is definitely a unique approach. And on that point, and on that mark, we have 4 key questions for the Panthers in 2020. And this first one is very interesting. Is Matt Rhule worth the dollars to coach this team? I would say worth the dollars to coach in the NFL.
Yeah. I would give it to
an NFL coach. I said that, but that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. First off, the one thing to I guess off the top is to recognize that this does not affect the salary cap, right? So it's all about, do you really care if your owner is spending that kind of money? Because even if he bombs out, it's really just your owner who's losing money. It's not affecting the salary cap of the team. So that's the first consideration. But I really like this guy. This guy is a program changer. And look, I mean, he almost beat Notre Dame with Temple. And then again, Baylor almost made it to the college football playoff. Now, I think some people might make the argument, well, okay, he's a program changer, but then when you get to that certain level, does he have the sophistication or talent to get them over the hump? Well, again, I don't think, in the end of the day, if you're not as good as another team at some, you're going to lose. And he took Oklahoma to the brink in both games last year. So I really am a believer in this guy. I think he is an innovative guy. I think he is sort of, he has the right mix of old school and new school.
I'd agree.
You know what I mean? So to me, I think he's worth the investment.
I would agree with you. I agree with you there. and it's not our money. So
that's true. That's true.
Aside from Christian McCaffrey, who excites you on this offense? That's
well, you know, I like DJ Moore, the wide receiver, formerly from Maryland, second-year player. Had a really nice rookie year. And then Robbie Anderson, I think pairing those two together should be pretty interesting. So those are probably the guys in particular that I really like the most. You know, the offensive line is sort of so-so, and obviously, you know, they're not necessarily going to excite you because they're not the ones running or carrying, catching or running with the ball. So to me, I think it's the pairing of those two young receivers. And if Curtis Samuel, their other wide receiver / sort of slot back, who was a second-round pick a few years ago out of Ohio State, if they could bring him along as well, I think they really have something that, you know, they could definitely work with.
Let's move on to the quarterback. Is Teddy Bridgewater the long-term answer at QB? And again, we've discussed it here early in the program. We both like him and respect him.
Yeah.
But I don't know is my take on this. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but he's a gamer, that's for sure.
Well, he definitely was not paid like an absolute long-term answer. There's definitely some outs there. But then again, every franchise essentially does that in that they're always giving themselves outs 1, 2, 3 years down the line.
Any smart franchise would do it. So like Dallas doesn't. So, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's, you know, that's what happens when you have too many facelifts. You know, the skin starts to cut off the blood.
My mask. Oh,
yeah. So, anyways, you know, I think he could be. I think it honestly depends on the development of the defense. If their defense quickly turns into a top unit, first, I don't necessarily think it will be right away because they just have so many young players. But if they have a top unit, then you have a situation like Jimmy G in San Francisco, where you don't necessarily need to have a top flight quarterback to get things done and to win. So I think, you know, I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is ever going to be a top 5 quarterback in this league. I think you can win with them, and I think depending upon the development of this team, they might choose to stick with him.
You mentioned the defense, so let's talk about it. What is the strongest area on this defense?
I think it probably has to be the defensive line and probably maybe the front seven, but I'm going to go specifically the defensive line. K'Wan Short is one of the better interior defensive tackles in this league. They just drafted, as we mentioned, Derek Brown in the first round, who I think is really talented. They drafted Brian Burge in the first round last year, who came on, and I think, you know, particularly this another year of physical development is going to be really good. And then drafting Yetur Gross-Matos, who's going to come on. I really like that. That's a good starting defensive line, and a defensive line that's going to be primarily intact for the next several years. So they're going to develop together, which I think is also important.
We will be giving you our prediction on the Carolina Panthers and the rest of the National Football League coming up on our big prediction show right before NFL kickoff. If you like this here program, throw a subscribe, a thumbs up, and a comment. Fantasy Sports, Daily Fantasy. Check out the scroll at the bottom. We've partnered with Thrive Fantasy, a new way to play daily fantasy sports. It's player prop bets in a variety of sports. NFL, MLB, NBA, PGA, esports. So League of Legends, way over my head. But you can play. You can bet. Use code SEC247. $20 gets you 20 or more. I'm Mike. That's Brett. We will see you tomorrow as we continue our 32 for 32.